This is
Yeah, I think
almost as
there's good. So hello and welcome to this fireside chat. My guest and my interview partner is Professor Michael Stein, who is the Executive Director of Harvard Law School Project on Disability. And we will talk about crisis response, humanitarian action that is disability inclusive and accessible. Um, Michael, please start by introducing yourself and why this is currently such an important topic for you.
Thank you very much, Michael. I'm Michael Stein from the Harvard Law School Project on Disability, hpod.org. I'm delighted to be with you. I only regret that I'm not here in person. And I wish everyone who is observing a happy Lunar New Year and a meaningful Ramadan. Persons with disabilities in the climate sector, much like in other sectors, have been by and large ignored or not included in policy development or in responses. And this is a long story about people with disabilities in various areas of international law and programming. And there have been wonderful efforts highlighted by the Zero research that need to be shown in order for OPDs to communicate with each other, for states to learn how to learn from them and from other state efforts, and to move forward as a way of responding to the climate crisis.
Yeah, thank you, Michael, for this introduction. Before I'm also introducing our research, let's start with something really concrete. Could you give us some examples how persons with disabilities are directly or indirectly affected by the climate crisis?
I'm happy to, although the numbers are not particularly cheerful. We know that of the roughly 1.3 billion persons with disabilities around the planet, they have contributed the least towards climate change and yet are in many ways affected the most. The mortality rate among persons with disabilities is 2 to 4 times that of individuals without disabilities. We can graphically illustrate this. For example, the heat waves in Australia, the heat wave in British Columbia, over 90% of the mortalities were people with disabilities. Within the disability community, particular sectors are disparately affected, such as those with psychosocial disabilities, multiple sclerosis, and other thermoregulation issues. And of course, we should note that our brothers and sisters from the indigenous communities with disabilities have the impact of losing access to their sacred spaces and to their religious and spiritual practices.
Yeah, thank you a lot, Michael, for this not so cheerful figures that you gave us, but I think it's absolutely needed to fully understand the impact of this subject that is commonly overlooked, and we are also glad that you contributed substantially to the recent publication of the Zero Project, which is Disability Inclusive Crisis Response. We could build on the research process that we did this year with the overall call for nomination, which was on accessibility and ICT, but included also crisis response solutions. We received a large number, then we shortlisted 30 of them, and we awarded 11 innovations that work in the general theme of crisis response. A few of them are also related to climate change response, and this report will be available online right after the Zero Project conference. I trust it will be over the weekend. For those who listen to us and watch us, just send us a note to office@zeroproject.org so that we can send you the link to this new publication. Yeah, so that was a kind of advertisement within this chat. And now let's continue with you, Michael. The obvious party to respond to climate crisis threats to people with disabilities would, of course, be governments. Do you see them reacting? And if I trust the answer will be mostly not, but how could they react to these threats?
Sadly, the number of governments that have responded constructively by including people with disabilities in their policy making and in their responses are a distinct minority. Bangladesh is an example of a good case example. Overall, 81% of parties to the Paris Agreement, which includes disability in its preamble, have no reference to disability in their nationally determined contributions. And when they do, they tend to lump disability along with other vulnerable populations. And yet there is the ability, both looking at nationally determined contributions, SDG responses, and other implementing international obligations to include people with disabilities and be much more active and creative in including their perspectives and learning from them. Governments can and should be able to empower the disability community just as they do empower other parts of their populations.
Yeah, thank you for this, Michael. Yesterday we had a good session together with our dear friends and partners from Light for the World, where we also discussed various aspects of crisis response and climate change response. And a common theme where basically all panelists and interventions from the floor agreed was that it's needed to cooperate with OPDs on the ground, to collaborate, to co-create solutions with people on the ground. And of course, government is also needed in that area to make really things work. But how could this work? How could governments interact with OPDs on the ground? Do you have any ideas or suggestions how to start such processes or make them happen?
Well, this year's Zero Research Project highlights good practices from which both governments and other OPDs can learn. It's very clear that OPDs and individuals with disabilities have been and continue to act as essential agents of positive change. They possess leadership, they possess problem-solving skills, and they're able to shape climate responses and action, both mitigation and adaptation, in a positive, forward-looking manner. The fact that people with disabilities are not included in these discussions, both in violation of the CRPD Article 4 and violation of the Paris Agreement, means that they have been overlooked. And one has only to look at the lack of a disability constituency at the annual COP, the climate conference, to see how they're being overlooked, despite being 16% of the globe's population. But this year's Zero Research Report, to add to your advertisement, actually highlights wonderful practices and shows that governments can learn from people with disabilities and people with disabilities can interact and teach governments. And whether it's the Purple Vest Project in Israel or the proactive emergency evacuation in Beppu, Japan, which was done in collaboration with the government, whether it's farmers with disabilities in Indonesia, whether it's flooding in Valencia, whether it's the mobile classrooms in post-earthquake Turkey. These are initiatives led by persons with disabilities, very often in conjunction with their governments. So the means to do it is there, the knowledge base, the local knowledge base to do it is there. Governments need to now pay attention and work with their local populations. It's in their best interest to do so as far as efficiency, as far as social justice, as far as international legal obligations. They simply need to start to do it.
Mm-hmm. Michael, looking more on the meta level of activity, there are certain international standards, protocols, United Nations related or not, that somehow exist in the area that we're currently talking about of again focusing on climate change response that are inclusive or accessible. Is there anything that our governments or OPDs can build on, Sendai protocol or the likes, or would this not be the right approach? And should people more start to work on the ground and build from on the ground? So what's your take on this?
Well, there are wonderful frameworks, whether it's the Sphere project or the Sendai framework or others. We need not reinvent the wheel. What we need to do is to marry the local knowledge and the local expertise and leadership of persons with disabilities with their governments in order to implement these frameworks. Right now, we have lots of good frameworks, including the IMF, International Monetary Fund, which includes disability in some of their funded climate responses. Yet, when you go on the ground and speak to local DPOs, local communities of disabilities, they have no contact with the implementers. So we need to make it more concrete, and we need to make it more operationalized in order to see forward progress. In the meantime, the organizations of persons with disabilities are acting either on their own or with helpful local governments and actually achieving some measure of success.
Michael, the reason why we as the Zero Project picked up this subject, and also why I trust you find this topic so important right now, is that there's not a lot of research out there, not a lot of publications out there. What specific area would you personally like to know and better understand and turn research activities towards in the relationship between disability and climate change?
It's a wonderful question. And again, the sad reality is the last time someone checked, less than 1% of articles related to climate change, planetary change, climate justice actually reference people with disabilities or the disability sector. And that is just amazing and depressing, in that 16% of the population is not being actively looked at, including, for example, wonderful articles on things like asthma effects or heat effects, where the affected populations are clearly people with disabilities, including things like loss and damage assessments, which do not include people with disabilities. So as an academic, as well as an advocate, to me, it's an area ripe for investigation and for highlighting and spotlighting what people with disabilities do, how they react to climate change, and what the differential impacts are on these communities. And that's why I'm so very excited by the work of the Zero Project, of course, in general and for many years, but this year in particular about the research report.
Yeah, thank you, Michael, also for highlighting our activities in this regard. I could also add the influence or the detrimental effect of heat on multiple sclerosis. So there's a lot to better understand in the future. Michael, we're coming to the end of this fireside. Is there anything that you want to mention, which you highlight, which you did not so far?
Just that once this report is issued and once the website at Zero has this information, it is an absolute treasure trove for OPDs and individuals with disabilities, as well as governments and researchers, to go and learn what their colleagues are doing around the world. It's a way of setting the example, and I encourage everyone to learn from these good practice examples and to adapt them to their own particular circumstances and to move together in solidarity. Now is a time in the world for us to act in unison.
Yeah, thank you so much. Just then let's close this session with another announcement. So we have agreed to work together also to present this report at the Conference of State Parties in New York in the United Nations in June this year. And yeah, as you said, we also believe that this is a report that especially those planners and executing agencies really could use as a guidebook. It's full of practical examples and checklists and the likes. So we really will try hard to make it well known throughout the community and every decision maker that should know about it. Michael, thank you again for joining us today. And with this, I'm closing this fireside chat. Thank you.
Thank you.